Good morning. Welcome to South Seas IJ. If that's not where you intended to be, you remember where the door was, so you can correct that. You are here for a talk entitled HTTP Cookie Hijacking in the Wild, Security and Privacy Implications. And you're going to hear from Suphannee Sivakorn and Jason Polakis. And you guys can introduce your other author. Before we begin, a few brief notes. Be sure to stop by the business hall located in Bayside AB. Remember that the Black Hat Arsenal is on in the Palm Foyer on level 3, and of course the Arsenal reception at 1700 this evening. If you haven't picked up your merchandise today, it's your last chance to visit the Black Hat Swag and bookstore. Spend your money. Don't forget to visit the Kali Linux Lab in Mandalay Bay A. And lastly, thank you for putting your phone on vibrate, which is a nice way of saying, please put your phone on vibrate, because it makes it easier for the rest of us to ignore the ringing that won't occur because your phone is on vibrate while you wait for your voicemail to pick it up. When we get to the question part, please do step up to the microphone. The talk is being recorded. That way your question will be recorded, and they won't have to repeat the question and spend time doing that. So without further ado, your speakers.
Okay. Hi, I'm Jason Polakis. Thanks for attending our talk, even though it's pretty early and there were quite a few parties yesterday. So this work was done jointly with Suphannee and in collaboration with Professor Angelos Keromitis that is not here today. So a little bit more information about who we are. Suphannee is a PhD student at Columbia University, entering her 4th year now. And I spent the past 2.5 years as a postdoc there at Columbia, so we've been working together a lot. And I just moved to Chicago as an assistant professor at UIC. So we've worked on various projects of security and privacy interest, but you might have come across our recent briefing at Black Hat Asia about our analysis and attacks against Google's reCAPTCHA system. So I'm going to try now and give some, set the tone and the backdrop of the talk we're going to give. So in the past year or so, there's been a massive public debate about the need for encryption, and various entities, of course, have been arguing about the need of introducing secure backdoors in the crypto stuff that we use. Now, of course, a lot of security professionals have been arguing against that for obvious reasons, and at the same time, a lot of security researchers have been demonstrating that it's really hard to get crypto correct in the first place, even without introducing any backdoors and stuff. However, the thing is that even though there are various attacks against SLTLS, it still remains a fundamental tool for protecting our communications. So is this talk going to be about encryption? No, it's not. I'm sorry if that makes any of you sad, but this is going to be more about the lack of encryption. So if we had to give a different title, let's say, to our work, and we imagined it as a story or a fairy tale, I would probably call it Web Services and the Quest for Ubiquitous Encryption. Now, major spoiler, this is unfortunately a very sad tale without a happy ending. Or depending if you're more optimistic than myself, and some stuff that have happened in the past 5-6 days, at the end of the talk, you might feel that we have a partially happy ending. So, a small overview of what we're going to talk about today. So at the beginning, I'm going to give a high-level description of how some services have HTTP and enforce HTTPS connections. And I'm going to talk about how the unencrypted connections will actually expose various cookies that we can use. And then in the main and most interesting part of the talk, Suphannee will give you all the nitty-gritty details about the services that we audited, what type of cookie hijacking attacks we did, and all the sensitive information and account functionality that we can access. And finally, I'm going to talk a bit about various mechanisms that have been deployed or are accessible to end users that can actually prevent cookie hijacking. Now, these defenses haven't been designed for that per se, but are ways that can enforce HTTPS, and as a side effect, it can actually prevent these HTTP cookies from being exposed. Now, after I talk about those a bit, I'll also talk about how in practice, for various deployment issues, they actually fail, and we can still see cookies being exposed that we can use for our attacks. So apart from the stuff that we're going to talk about today, the various negative effects of cookies have been explored in the past, of course, and there's been some really interesting work in the past year. So Engelhardt et al. Talked about how third-party cookies that can be found on a large number of websites can lead to powerful adversaries being able to track users at a massive scale. And in a really interesting paper at Usenix Security, they showed that even if we have cookies that are set to secure, a man in the middle could actually inject cookies through an HTTP response, which can lead to very interesting attacks. So I'm sure most of you are aware of what HTTP cookie hijacking is, but I'll give you a simple description of what we see in our paper. So let's consider that we have Bob, who's at his favorite coffee shop, drinking some coffee, acai latte, whatever, I don't know what they drink, and he's doing some work and visiting his favorite websites. Now, unfortunately, since this coffee shop has a free Wi-Fi, everyone can connect to it, and anything that's unencrypted can actually be sniffed by someone. So here comes our happy little hacker who can see the various cookies being transported into the clear text and can actually take them and then contact those same web services and append those cookies. Now, the web service, of course, will use those to identify the user, and thinking that our attacker is actually Bob, it will return a personalized version of this website. And that, of course, can allow the attacker to get access to both very sensitive information as well as protected account functionality. Now, I know what some of you might be thinking. We know HTTP cookie hijacking. We've known about it for years. So why are we talking about it in 2016? So it's true. We've known about it for years, especially in 2010. There was massive publicity with the Fireship extension that showed how easy it could be to hijack accounts in services like Facebook and Twitter. And of course, all this publicity was really good because it kind of spearheaded a migration to HTTPS in lots of popular services. Now, in a recent study from the SSO Pulse project, they found that out of 140,000 websites that they looked at, approximately 40.5% actually supports HTTPS. Okay, that means it supports it, doesn't mean it has it everywhere on the website. And that's something that's really important for the rest of the talk. So now I'm going to show a simple workflow of how many services tend to enforce encrypted communication. So we have our browser here and the web server for one of the websites that we want to go to. And let's consider an example for Google. So I'll open up my browser. I'll usually just type google.com, press enter. And by default, the browser will assume that it should connect over HTTP. So it's going to issue a GET request. Now, since the server does support HTTPS, it will actually send a redirection code and tell the browser that it should connect over HTTPS. Okay, so what's going to happen next is we're going to have our communication over HTTPS. Everything is secure. Everything looks fine. However, the problem is that the initial communication, the initial GET request is sent over HTTP. So if the browser finds a cookie for that domain in the cookie jar, it will actually append it. And that's where the door opens up for us to be able to do these attacks. Now, I don't know if it surprises everyone, but before we started looking at this, in my mind, I always thought that this wouldn't happen, but maybe I just didn't think of it enough. So this is basically one of the interesting parts of how we can attack services that in general, most people consider to have encryption everywhere. So for this study, we actually looked at 25 of the most popular websites out there. And they're from different categories. So we looked at banking sites, social networks, search engines, e-commerce, media outlets, things like that. And we found out of the 25, 15 do support HTTPS, but don't enforce it everywhere on their domains, subdomains, and all the URLs. Okay, so this number might not seem that large, but you have to keep in mind these are 25 of the most popular websites in the world. Okay, so this number is pretty bad. Now, the thing is that in most cases, apart from not supporting encryption everywhere, what they do is that they'll offer a personalized version of the website. And they do that to maximize user engagement. So if you go to Amazon, Amazon will not want to force you to log in right away before you start looking, let's say, at products. Now, the thing is that all these websites are massive, and in many cases, they might have a very large number of cookies. So Google, I think, has close to 50 cookies they use, which is crazy. And of course, you have all these complicated interoperability, which can lead to flawed access control. And Suphannee is going to talk about a really interesting example, at least in my case, of how we can actually use that to bypass protection that Google has on Google Maps. And finally, we'll see what kind of sensitive information and account functionality is actually exposed in all 15 of these services. So to make sure that we're all on the same page, we consider a very weak adversary for this attack. So it's a simple passive eavesdropping on the traffic. So we don't have a man in the middle. We don't inject anything. We just simply listen to the traffic and extract any cookies that we see. Suphannee will now take over and give you some details about our research things.
All right. Can you hear me clearly? All right, awesome. So yeah, the threat model that we consider here is the eavesdropping, which is like the simplest threat in the traffic network. So first, of course, the way we do eavesdropping is just like have to access any targeted network. So it could be like any open Wi-Fi. If you are a powerful attacker, you can do wiretappings, middle boxes work as well, or do proxy, or even do a Tor exit node. I mean, we have an experiment on that, and Jason's going to talk about it in the next few slides. So next, we need a tool to sniffing. So, I mean, probably you guys already know, like TCP dump, Wireshark, these kind of tool is well known and like used in our attacks as well. So, another thing that we should consider is if the HTTP connection is coming in a fragment, you have to make sure that you like do a TCP the reassembly before to maximize the number of connections you're gonna have. Then come to the part where we want to steal the cookie. So, of course, cookie is in the HTTP connection headers, and this, what I show, is one of the HTTP requests, which basically is going to give you a lot of information on it, but just the only thing that we care in the header part is just like the hosts and cookies. So host is basically going to tell you which domain name or which server the victim is connecting to. Why the cookie is the core of the attack here, since it's used to authorize the user to the website. So as I give an example of here, it's like 3 cookies. You can have more or you can have less, definitely. Another thing that you can take advantage of is by looking at the HTTP response, which basically there's like a field called set cookie in the header, where basically it's going to give you the cookies and also like the host name. We usually not seeing this HTTP response so much, since like when these days after the connection switched to HTTPS, after you log in, you switch to HTTPS, these type of response is transferred on HTTPS. But you never know. A site could do something stupid and then set it on like HTTP. And then you can take advantage of that. So now we have the cookies. How can we access the data? So of course we want to access the user data. So we're going to imitate user. We can send a request with the stolen cookie. So we're going to try, I insist you to try for both HTTP and HTTPS. So the reason is that even if you have just non-secure cookies, but a lot of cases we found that even if you have non-secure cookie, you send on HTTP, and it gives you different information when you send on HTTPS. So this kind of thing is reveal a lot of access for in the service that they're not doing it correctly. So we request, and how do we know that we get personal information out? So the easiest way is just okay, you set a cookie in the browser, you open it up, and then it's see if there is any, username, or something like that. But the better way to do it and faster is by probably sending 2 requests, one request with cookies and the other without cookie. Then if you see any differences, if the size is differences or any elements, HTML element that different or any text difference, so you can assume that if this difference is on the stolen cookie HTTP request, it could be the case that these could contain some personal information or any personalization that user have. So this thing will give you a rough idea of okay, what kind of element you're looking for. So of course there are a lot of tools already do that for you, like Curve, simple one. If you want to just get the static HTML page out. You can do Selenium, Phantom.js, which is like, gonna render some active content for you as well. So we already know that. And then after we know it, we identify the HTML element that we're looking for. We can just do like it as like a script and then do it like attack in a real time, like collecting all the information that leak it out. So we already, the attack that I just show it to you is pretty straightforward, and people know that. But the thing is, like, why it's still working on this day? Like, so the question is, like, what can we access by just using HTTP cookies? Okay, on the HTTPS site. So we take a look at the top search engine here, which we have Google, Baidu, Bing, and Yahoo, which is like, the most search engine in the world. And surprisingly, we're able to de-anonymize the user. We're able to get user information, email, profile picture, first name, and last name. I just want to insist again that we just use HTTP cookies. Why this much information give out? I don't know. Okay, so another important thing is we also like able to get search or visited history as well. So for Baidu, Bing, and Yahoo, we simply just get entire information, entire search history, all visited. So for Google, since they're a bit carefully, but we still somehow able to reconstruct it. So if attacker have found a keyword or a similar keyword that user have been previously searched before, if there is like a page showing up that user have been visited before, it's going to show the information that, okay, user have been visited this page how many times and on the date, which is like the default setting on Google. So since Google and Baidu, Bing, they all offers like a map services as well. So for Baidu and Bing, we simply just get like all the safe and forever location that user have that tie to that account. Okay. For Google, even if we cannot access like HTTP on Google Maps, okay, there are like a flaw in access control that if you search in the search bar of the google.com, like home or work, it will give you like exact location and also like the map to your house, which is like lead to many physical threat, like stalking and all kinds of that. Crazy, right? So another service that we're looking at is Yahoo. So Yahoo have many services, and we actually break all of them, but except the mail that we didn't have a chance, like we didn't get in. But we have like the side channel that we can do. So one of the services that Yahoo have is like the Yahoo Answer, and people use it a lot these days. So Yahoo Answer, like I'm sure that probably you guys like familiar with that. But okay, after we having the HTTP cookie, we're able to answer or ask the question as a user. We also be able to since like Yahoo Answer also give user ability to answer or ask question anonymously, we're able to review those questions even if it's answered or asked anonymously as well. So even if we cannot get into Yahoo Mail, so we're able to doing a little attack on here. So basically this is like the screenshot from the homepage of Yahoo. And what we get, if we just have HTTP, we're able to get like an email notification with the title and a snippet of the message. Another thing that we also get, and it's so surprised, that we're able to extract the whole contact list that user have on the victim email. So since like Yahoo have like a lot of service like Yahoo News and Yahoo Sport, if you click on a button, they give ability for the user to share an article via an email address, which is like an email from Yahoo. If you click that button, it's going to pop up this screenshot, and basically it's going to give you like, okay, what kind of email of the user. And also, since they have an autocomplete feature on the two forms, so if you press just one button, you basically get the entire email address that is on the victim. So this is so surprising. And plus, we're able to send an email as the user as well. Yeah, by just like using this pop-up, and we also add some customization message. So of course it's gonna facilitate any phishing or spamming attack. Next, we take a look at like the popular e-commerce sites like Amazon, eBay, Walmart, and Target. So fortunately, they all support HTTPS, okay? But unfortunately, they only support HTTPS over the logged-in account and checkout page. So this means that the rest of the page is on HTTP, and it means that we can get all the information, username, email, by just using HTTP cookie. We also able to get like and modify item in cart, widlets, recent view item, or any purchase item that user have. So this could be like an attack where you could like monitor the network and then like seeing like user don't have anything in the cart, you just add it in. This should work as well. So eBay surprisingly also review entire shipping address. So yeah, leading to again physical attack. Another thing that Amazon and Target offer is like they offer a user to send like a recommendation of the product page to any email address. So if you have these cookie or the Amazon and Target HTTP cookie, you're able to send an email as a user as well. So again, this is going to be like facilitate any spam or phishing. Just to update you, I think a few weeks ago, so Amazon like announced that they're going to move everything to HTTPS. Okay, but however, since like our attack is not really relying on HTTPS, like Jason said, we like the other way around. We get HTTP cookie from the first connection, then I just checked and everything just working fine. So any information that we show here is still true. All right, next we take a look at the ad network. And we already know that there are a lot of work on the ad network, and we know that all the ads that show to user these days, they are all tailored to specific like user profile and history of browsing. So now we want to see if to get the ad network cookie, what kind of information that he can get. So we set up like a small experiment here on the left side. We have just like a victim visited like a shopping website, and then we have the ad network cookie installed into attacker on the right-hand side here. And attacker can go to any website, that have like these kind of ad network integrated on the site. So surprisingly, it's the ad that shown here is not just only reveal user visited website, but it also like show exact page, exact product that user have been visited. It's going to be a lot of like privacy leakage here. If a victim is pregnant woman, and then it's like attacker is just like, okay, seeing some pregnant product or anything related to baby or something. Did he definitely know about this user? Right. So we actually take a look more, in many services. But since we don't have time to cover that in the presentation, so this table is basically list of the service that we take a look, and we able to get some information out of it, like the way that I described previously. Okay, and the right-hand side is the cookies that you need, okay, to be able to get information that I have shown previously. So usually I'll give you out. Usually it shouldn't, but we trust you guys, so use it ethically. Okay?
Please be nice about it.
Yeah, please be nice about it. So next, we also take a look at the other cookie perspective, the browser extension, which is based on HTTP and HTTPS, and also mobile app these days on the background, they do a lot of HTTP and HTTPS requests as well. So, we can see that, the table is huge, and roughly we can see that there are a lot of the leakage of HTTP cookie is so common, okay? Not only on the browser side, but also we also get on the mobile side as well, mobile apps as well. So another surprising finding is we found a lot of leakage on iOS, more than a lot of leakage compared to Android, with the same app. So this is one thing that we have to take a look at, and really have to be careful if you're a developer. So next, Jason's going to speak about attack, evaluation, and defense. So yeah.
Okay, so of course, after we did our study and all these websites, we wanted to do an evaluation of our attack, an actual evaluation. So there were two main aspects that we were afraid that might impact the effectiveness of what we wanted to do. So on one hand, one question that we had was whether users will actually behave differently when they're connected to a public Wi-Fi. So will everyone use a VPN? Or will they log out of everything? Or avoid websites that don't have HTTPS? Of course, that's wishful thinking, but nonetheless, it's something that we had in our mind. And on the other hand, of course, what mechanisms have already been deployed or adopted that can prevent the cookie hijacking? So what we did is we monitored approximately 15% of Colombia's public Wi-Fi for 1 month. Now, of course, we had to get IRB approval for that. Now, if whoever's not aware of IRB, it's something that we have to do in academia when we do experiments with user data or stuff like that, where you have to give a description of what you're going to do, what the goal is, what type of data you're going to collect, how you're going to handle it, and they're going to do some type of risk-benefit analysis and look at the ethical aspects and decide if they'll let you do it or not. Okay, so that kind of prohibits what you can actually do in your research. But in this case, I think it was good enough for us to see how effective our attacks are. So we collected the HTTP and HTTPS traffic that we saw, and for the unencrypted, we extracted the URL, cookie name, and we also kept a hash of the cookie value. Now for the HTTPS traffic, we just got the SNI, which allowed us to see which domain the users are connecting to. Now, I'm sure lots of you would prefer if we actually kept the cookies value, which would allow us to differentiate all the users. So even if you connect from multiple devices or for some reason the cookie value changed within the monitoring period, we would still be able to get an exact number of the users that we saw. Unfortunately, there was no way they would allow us to do that. So by keeping a hash, we're able to differentiate the user on one device within one service. But of course, the numbers I'm going to show you might be overcounting some. But still, I think they're large enough to be pretty interesting. So Google, of course, was our main target, and we were actually able to collect 67,000 vulnerable accounts. Okay, so even if we consider that we'll double or triple counting some users, it's still a massive number if you think that we just look at part of our university's wireless network for only 1 month. Okay, so we can imagine how good the attack can be for someone with more resources that can run the attack at a larger scale. And of course, even other services like Yahoo and Amazon were able to get many thousands of accounts. So now I'd like to kind of step back and try and look at the wider implications of this attack. So of course, all of us know that the government, lots of governments and intelligence agencies and law enforcement agencies are massively collecting traffic. And of course, anything that's unencrypted is really bad. Now, the thing is that we also know that they're massively collecting cookies. And they've used that for various reasons, trying to identify users that might be using a specific network, which will give them a better target. And of course, we know that Tor users have been targeted many times by these agencies. So I think you're probably getting the idea of where I'm trying to go. So we wanted to see what the attack implications are for the Tor network. Now, of course, everyone, I'm sure, knows about the Tor network, so we're not going to talk about how it works and stuff like that. But what is important, I think, in the context of our attack is that it's used by many privacy-conscious users, many whistleblowers, activists. So it's people that it's very critical for them to maintain their anonymity, okay? Now, the thing is that with the Tor bundle being available has really lowered the threshold of technical literacy you have to actually use a Tor network. So that means that lots of people that are using it don't have an awareness of all the threats that might be facing. They have a misconception of what the Tor network might actually be offering them. So we know that the Tor network is not designed to prevent this type of attacks. Okay, so why would we do an experiment here? What is different? The thing is that the Tor bundle comes with the Tor browser, of course, which has a really interesting extension pre-installed, and that's HTTPS everywhere. So this is quite popular. I think they have several million installations. And this can actually prevent cookie hijacking attacks because the goal is to enforce connections to go over HTTPS. And I'm going to talk about that more in a couple slides. So for this experiment, we monitored fresh Tor exit node for 1 month. And again, we had to get IRB approval. Of course, due to the very sensitive nature of traffic on Tor and for the reasons I said, we kind of opted for a less invasive experiment. So we didn't even touch any cookies. We just looked at aggregate statistics of how many connections were over HTTP and over HTTPS towards the sites that we had audited. Now, of course, this prohibits us from being able to evaluate how many users actually exposed the cookies that we needed. But by looking at the amount of unencrypted connections going out from the Tor exit node that we were looking at, we found that approximately 75% of all the connections were over HTTP. Okay, so even though we don't have numbers about how many cookies were in that traffic, I think it's safe to assume that many users were actually exposing themselves to these attacks. So if we look, we can see that for Google and Yahoo, okay, the encrypted connections were slightly higher, but there was a massive difference for all the other websites. And of course, we can see that there's significant traffic for Amazon. So I don't think it makes much sense for someone to go to Amazon without being logged in and having the goal of buying something. So at least in that case, I think most of those HTTP connections would be exposing cookies. So I think that this is actually a really practical de-anonymization attack that some entities might try to deploy against Tor. And this is a literal de-anonymization attack. So it's going to tell you who that person is, where they live, where they work, what they look at, what they're interested in, what they bought on Amazon. Okay, so this is, I think it's really interesting and really something that Tor users have to keep in mind. So now I'm going to talk a bit about the countermeasures that that have been deployed that can kind of impact these attacks. So HSTS is actually gaining a lot of traction, and it's a really interesting proposal. So the idea here is that a server will be able to instruct the user's browser to only connect over HTTPS. Okay, so when you have that redirection, there's gonna be a header in the response that will tell the browser, let's say, I'm google.com, whenever you wanna connect to me, you'll have to do it over HTTPS. Okay, and this header will contain the max age variable, which actually tells the browser for how many seconds it should cache this policy. Okay, so a typical value is like 6 months or 1 year. Now the header can also contain 2 more optional directives. The first one is include subdomains. So if that's in the header, it will actually tell the browser if the user is trying to connect, let's say, to mail.google.com or api.google.com, again, to enforce an encrypted connection. Now, the second directive is preload, which means that this website is either in submission for getting added to the preload list, which I'll tell you in a minute what it is, or it's already been added to that list. So what is the HSTS preload list? Now, this is a hard-coded list of entries that is shipped with all major browsers, which actually contains these directives, these policies for various domains. And why is the reason that they have that? Now, if you keep in mind the original scenario I talked about of how we have this redirection from HTTP to HTTPS, and that leaves us a door to steal the cookie, the same thing happens with HSTS. So the first connection that the user is going to send before they get that directive, before they get that command to always connect over HTTPS, they can still expose a cookie. So what does HSTS preload do? It actually eliminates that redirection. So the browser will look at any domain or any URL that the user is going to try to connect to, and it's going to look within the preload list. And if it finds it there, it will also do the initial connection over HTTPS. However, there are various deployment issues with HSTS that can allow attackers to still do our attacks. So on one hand, to be able to get into the preload list, which is actually managed by the Chromium project, shipped with a Chrome browser, and then the other browsers just take that and use that or a subset of it. Now, the thing is that to get on that list, there are various requirements. And one of them is that you have to support HTTPS on all your subdomains. Now, the thing is that many websites have legacy code base with legacy URLs and functionality that doesn't support HTTPS. So the problem is that those websites can't get on the preload list. Now, as I'm going to say again at the end of the talk, just partially deploying it will not save you. It can make the attack surface smaller, but it will still expose the user in many cases. However, by not allowing these websites to actually get on the preload list, which is like a step in better direction, it's like a good step forward, I think it makes things worse for everyone. Now, another problem is the partial adoption of HSTS. So in many cases, services will not they won't put the include subdomain directive. So they might protect their main domain, but not protect other domains. So in that case, again, the user will be exposed. And I think the most interesting case that we found was Google, which actually protects their subdomains, but doesn't protect the main google.com domain or any of the regional versions, so .co.uk, .it, .cn, or whatever. So if you try to go to Gmail by typing mail.google.com, you'll be protected because it's a subdomain. But if you go by google.com/mail, you won't be protected. Unfortunately, in the past 5 days, this was actually fixed. But, well, fortunately, in the past 5 days, this was fixed. And I'll talk about that in a couple slides. Yeah, sorry. Can we delete the video of the unfortunately part? That shouldn't go up there. Yes, unfortunately. So another problem, there was a really interesting study at NDSS in 2015 where they did a large-scale evaluation of the deployment of HSTS and HSTS preload and certificate pinning, and they found that we're still in a very early state of adoption. So things are getting better, but they still are very, very bad. And of course, in many cases, they found that there were many misconfigurations which actually prevented HSTS from protecting the users. And finally, there have been a couple of talks about attacks against HSTS, but you can look those up by yourself. We don't have time for that. Now, I'm going to talk a bit about HTTPS Everywhere. So this is a browser extension that was built by the EFF and the Tor project, and it actually comes pre-installed in the Tor browser. Now, the whole idea is that you have a set of rule sets that try to identify cases where they try to identify the domain that the user is connecting to and see if they can enforce a connection to go over HTTPS. Okay, so the idea is that the extension looks at which domain you're connecting to. They use regular expressions to see if the part you want to go to is supported by supports HTTPS or not, and then enforce a rewrite. So this is actually like the simplest type of case where you could find, where you have the target host example.com, and the rule for modification is just to add an S. Okay. Now, there are various issues because in practice things aren't that simple. So one of the major problems is that since this is based on a community effort, so you have volunteers manually looking at websites and creating these rule sets. So the thing is that can, of course, lead to human errors. Now, this is some ongoing work that we're doing, so we can't give you more details for now, but you can take our word on it. So another case, of course, is, as I said, not every part of a website will support HTTPS. So in those cases, of course, this extension has to identify them and exclude them from the modification rule. Okay, so we'll have exclusion patterns that will have a regular expression and try to identify the users connecting to something that doesn't support HTTPS. So for example, in Amazon, if you go over HTTPS on a product page, it breaks the functionality of adding the product to your basket. So it pretty much makes the website useless. And of course, another problem is that when you have very large websites, sometimes it becomes far more complicated, even if HTTPS is supported. So for example, Amazon Images has a different domain for the images if you connect over HTTP or HTTPS. So of course, keep in mind that these volunteers have to do that manually and identify all these minute cases. And of course, that shows you that there are many places where this can go wrong. Nonetheless, as we'll see here, HTTPS Everywhere does help a bit. So we wanted to do an experiment and see how good it is, how much can it help us. And the idea is to see what if every user that we monitored during our experiment at Columbia actually had that installed? How many would be protected? So we extracted the URLs and tested them against the rule sets and saw how many were actually modified to HTTPS and saw how many of the cookies were actually exposed. So we have a different percentage of reduction across services. So for Google and Yahoo, approximately 50% is protected. For other websites like eBay or Target, there's no rule set, so nothing is protected. Nonetheless, over 73% of the accounts remain exposed. So it does help. Everyone should add it, but we should know the limitations of this defense as well. Now, disclosure. Of course, we sent detailed reports to all of the services that we looked at. And we got a wide range of responses. So I'm going to show my three favorites here because I think they nicely reflect the mentality of certain large websites regarding what we try to do. So in the first case, I'll read this because, of course, I don't remember these by heart. The related tokens predate the existence of the HTTP-only setting and have several legacy applications that do not support the setting. On new applications, we're working on new session management tokens that will be marked as secure and HTTP-only. So this shows that these services do have legacy code base, and they just accept it. They accept the risk. They don't care about fixing it. But don't worry, the newer stuff will be secure, so everything is fine. Now, the second one, we have looked at the behavior of XXX is the name of the cookie, so we don't want to say which service this was, of course. We don't want to get sued. Please delete that as well. The behavior of the cookie hijacking that we reported, and we can confirm that this is expected from our service stack. Okay? However, keep in mind, we do not rely on the cookie for authentication purposes. And as such, authentication would be required before visiting any sensitive areas of the account. So it doesn't matter that all this personal information is leaked, since you can't gain access to the account and do other stuff, we're perfectly fine. And it's expected. It's something that's expected by the service stack. So you tell them about this vulnerability and they don't care to fix it. It's like, oh yeah, we expect that. Since you can't take over the account, everything is fine. And my personal favorite, in this case, we found the issue to be invalid as it is an accepted business risk. So not only do they consider this an acceptable risk for their users because it's not their problem for them to make money and to have their business, but they also consider the fact that some people do some research for free, give them that information on how to fix it, and they consider that invalid. So I don't know. It's awesome. This slide was added a couple days ago because we wanted to say, what's the aftermath? So we told all these services back in November. So a lot of time has gone by. They should fix some stuff. And some of the services are working on it. They're changing stuff around, but our attacks work in every case. However, Google, of course, decided 5 days ago, 5 days before our presentation, to deploy HSTS on google.com, fortunately. Now, the thing is, though, that it's still in testing phase, okay? So they've set the max age to only 1 day. And it's not in the preload list yet, or unless they updated the list in Chrome and shipped that out so fast, but I think it's safe to assume that it's not in the preload list yet. So that means you can still play around with this attack. However, I think in some depth of time, this will not be, it won't be doable on google.com. But for now, if you get access to the cookie, we tested it, the attack still works, okay? But it might be more difficult than just a straightforward sniffing at whatever, your favorite coffee shop. So, to conclude some takeaways, which I hope aren't too obvious or too silly, but let's try. So I think one thing that I took away from this is going back to the basics. So let's say if you're a web developer and you're creating this massive website, and you do all the cool protection techniques, so to prevent cross-site scripting and CSRF and tokens and all that, and get overlooked one of the most well-known and simple, straightforward attacks, then it means that you're probably not doing your job that well. And of course, it's only human, okay? These websites have awesome engineers, awesome security teams, no one doubts that. But it's only human to sometimes overlook something that's so obvious. So if I was looking at it from our side, so an attacker side or an evaluator side, I would say always assume the worst. So time and time again, when we look at services that we want to attack and try to identify design flaws or implementation flaws, almost always the initial, most simplistic attack that we can think of, where the first idea is like, there's no way they would do that wrong. There's no way this would work. In practice, many times something so obvious is something they missed. So always assume the worst or the best, depending on how you look at things, and try to go for the simple things as well. Don't always try to go for something super complicated. Now, the second one is only for web developers or whatever the service, and not for the attackers, but I put that because of the responses that we got. So we see that services will actually sacrifice security for usability and for supporting this legacy code base. However, this is exposing users to very significant threats. So they should stop accepting the risk and be willing to put in the effort to build systems that protect us. We have I'm not talking about everything, but for known attacks where we have the defenses, we can prevent that. They should put in the effort. Of course, this is from the point of view of someone that doesn't work in the industry, hasn't worked on these teams, so there might be some massive insight that I'm missing. Please come talk to me after the talk if you want to tell me something like that or insult me. But I think that, at least from my point of view, this is something that we should be doing. And finally, halfway is no way. So we have these defenses, and we're only partially adopting them. And in some cases, in some type of attacks, a best effort approach is good. But in this case, it's not, because a single HTTP request is all you need. So even if you reduce the attack surface, and let's say 90% of a request I'm going to do within a day is protected, if the rest of the 10% is exposed, you didn't actually prevent anything. And from an attacker's point of view, I would say try to understand the limitations. So look at the defenses, try to understand how they work, and in which cases, which corner cases might not be protected. And go from there and try to see how you can attack the system or not. So with that, I'd like to thank you for paying attention and coming to our talk when there were so many other awesome talks at the same time. Feel free to ask us any questions. We'll try to answer them. Send us an email if you want. Buy us a drink afterwards if you like the talk. If anyone's interested in pursuing a PhD in security and privacy, come talk to me. That's all. Thank you.